im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati.
Pozdrav, dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Danas je moja gošća jedna vrlo zanimljiva dama i naša zajednička iskustva proteklih nekoliko godina će vam dovoljno reći o tome zašto sam je i pozvao danas. Dakle, njeno ime je Miss Laura Aboli. Hello, Miss Aboli, welcome to our show in Croatia.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can you tell our audience who is Miss Laura Aboli?
I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I co-founded a company called WorldCheck in the year 2000, which was the first global database of heightened risk individuals. We served the financial community mainly, but also law enforcement and all sorts of big institutions that had to do strict KYC and due diligence type of processes in order to carry out business. So that's kind of my professional background. I did exit. I did sell the company a few years back. And what I do now as a speaker or as a writer or an activist, if you will, really started in the year 2000 when the pandemic and what was happening surrounding the pandemic really made me very frustrated and very angry to watch how people were complying with the loss of our civil rights and freedoms. And I felt that I needed to do something about it, and I needed to inform people of the greater agenda that was behind everything. So this is why I'm here today talking to you.
Yes, that's right. You are entrepreneur and activist at the same time, just like me. Can you tell us just a few sentences how you come in this activist field, fighting for freedom from your business, from your entrepreneurship?
Well, as I said, it was in the year 2020 when the pandemic started that I felt something needed to be done. And I had already started this journey of awakening, as we call it now, where I was a little more aware perhaps than others as to what agendas were in place and what the greater plan was for humanity. And I could see that the pandemic was just one more event leading to that inevitable, well, hopefully not inevitable, but the plan that they're trying to push us towards. And so I really started just writing on a channel on Telegram because it was the one platform that I felt would not censor me at the time. And my readership grew and grew, and I started then speaking at conferences and doing more videos, and one thing led to another. And there was a very big speech that went viral that I gave last year. And this is where I continue. I started a movement, an organization called UDMAF to try and gather like-minded people that want to make a difference and that believe that each and every one of us can actually make that difference in the world. So here I am, still speaking, still fighting.
Yes, I saw you this speech. Can you repeat this speech for Croatian audience?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to repeat the whole speech. It was a 10-minute speech, but I was invited by the World Council for Health to their Better Way conference, which was held in Bath in the UK in June last year. And the panel was on transhumanism. And so I gave a speech where I did not only speak of the future of transhumanism as they have envisaged for us, but I also outlined the ways in which in the last few decades they have been actually prepping us to accept that post-human future that they want for us. And so I think that I touched a nerve with a lot of people who recognized all of these things that we have been subjected to already. And one of the characteristics that my speech brought to the public was really identifying these things and how they've really been attacking at everything that gives humans strength and courage and purpose in order to get us to a place that we might accept a post-human future, which is really the end of our species as we know it.
How do you imagine this after-human future, this transhuman future?
How do they imagine it? Well, it's for them. It's obviously the ultimate, the end game, as I call it, and it's the end game because it is the ultimate of control over us. The minute that we start implanting technology under the skin, the minute that they can survey us under the skin, we will be controllable. We will be one more thing in this digital grid that they are very slowly but surely putting in place. And we have heard people like Yuval Noah Harari say how the pandemic, how COVID was critical in making people accept biometric surveillance under the skin. So this is not in the distant future. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is very much something that they have planned for us, and something that I'm fighting against because I think we are God-created creatures and that we are born free and that we should continue to be free. And it's definitely what I want for my children. I do not want this dystopian post-human future where we are just one more thing in the Internet of Things.
Yeah, I had some interviews and they were explaining me what this means Internet of Things and what this means Internet of Bodies. And they told me that this 5G technology is something that will connect Internet of Things, but 6G will connect Internet of Bodies. Is there this technology that they are planning to use?
Yes, absolutely. Like I say, I think that they are slowly building this digital grid that we will be living under, this matrix, as I call it. And this is why there's been this very large push towards digitalizing everything, making everything smart, whether it's a TV or a fridge or your car. Everything needs to be able to be connected to a grid, an electric grid, so that it can be controlled, it can be turned on, it can be turned off. They've already been speaking of putting in kill switches on cars by the year 2026, which means that if you were ever to perhaps go further than you're allowed to, they can just stop your car. So this is the end of freedom of movement. It'll be the end of our own freedom to choose what goes into our bodies the minute that we accept this biometric surveillance type of reality.
Yeah, they call it SMART, but it's acronym for surveillance, monitoring, analyzing, technology, and reporting.
That's right.
Well, very simple. They're telling us everything in front, and it's up to us if we want to believe them. We're telling all the time they. Who are they?
Oh, that is a good question and a very long one to answer, and one that I often, the they that I refer to, that you refer to, is obviously those that pull the strings, those that have the power or perceived power in the world to shift things and make things happen. They have been in power for generations. You can start, going into bloodlines and certain families and all of these things. And there are books and books that have been written about who is they. To me, who are they is not as important as identifying what they are trying to do to us. So we could spend a lot of time working at who are they, and they don't really want to be seen. Those that are really, really holding the power ultimately are so high up, they're very much hidden behind the scenes, and they do not want to be seen. And so I find that working at who they are might be of value, but I think it's far more important to understand what they are planning to do and what they have in store for us, so that we can counteract that and we can unveil the lies, the manipulation, and the deception, so that we can make better choices for humanity.
I would like to speak about tools what they are using. They're using some politics. For example, they used pandemic. That's just policy. What they had purpose to do, some, as you said, digitalization of everything is one part. Maybe even collective of DNA of everybody. They can use it for the future. Also, pandemic brought big test, stress test, how we are going to react and who are going to be the biggest enemies of them. What other policies they are using for to fulfill this plan?
Oh, tons. And I think perhaps the most important thing for people to take away from this discussion is to really understand the ultimate goal. When you understand the ultimate goal, you can deconstruct it and really begin to become aware of the steps that are being taken as we speak to get us there. So, what people need to understand is that we really need to stop living under the illusion that governments and governmental institutions of any sort have our best interest at heart. It's just simply not true. And it hasn't been true in the history of humanity. So I don't know why anybody would think that that has changed now. It hasn't. They don't work for us and they don't work for our benefit. And it's become very obvious that it's never about generating wealth and well being. It's always about managing poverty at best. But so let's put aside that illusion that they have the best interest at heart for us and understand that the plan is to create a one world government, a totalitarian technocracy. Okay. Once you understand that that is the purpose, and they speak of it, this is not me inventing it, it's this new world order they've been speaking of for decades. This great reset, it's the same thing. This fourth industrial revolution, it's again the same thing. It's about bringing into place this totalitarian technocracy. Now, if you want to get the whole population of this world to that point, you need to take a number of very major steps and actually convince humanity that it's for our good, for our best interest. And so you first need to break national sovereignty and national identity. You need to break personal sovereignty and personal identity, and you need to destroy our livelihoods and our financial independence. So if these three major parts form part of getting us to that point, we can then look at how are they going about doing this. So, for example, when it comes to destroying the national sovereignty or the national identity of countries, we could start talking about the massive illegal immigration that we have seen in the last few years. It has happened already for decades, but it has been increased dramatically in the last couple of years. How does that affect nations? It affects nations' identities because with time you destroy a national culture, a national traditions, a national language, the national religion, whatever that may be. This is a way of breaking the national spirit, the national character, and the national sovereignty of a country. You then add to that this new pandemic treaty that they're speaking of that should be signed, hopefully not, in May of 2024, where the WHO will be able to call at their whim a global emergency. And then every country within the WHO, and that's 194 nations, that's pretty much the entire world, will be subject to their, not recommendations as we saw in the pandemic in 2020, but their mandates. WHO will be mandating what each nation must do. They will be in control of information. They will be in control of any measures that they seem fit, whatever they may be, whether it's again experimental medications, drugs, or vaccines. And nations will have no recourse against these mandates. They can impose again vaccine passports, and that which will probably be linked to digital wallets, digital CBDCs. So you can see how, disguised as a pandemic treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations, we are seeing an attack on the world's sovereignty, each nation's sovereignty. So that's how they're coming at us from destroying our national sovereignty and identity. That goes also into how they're planning on destroying our personal identity, and we can then introduce things like transhumanism, the transgender agenda. Again, that's messing up with people's psyches, people identities to make us more prone to accept in a post-human future where maybe we are half human, half cyborgs. I don't know. This is all part of destroying human identity. So let's destroy national identity. Let's destroy human identity, and then let's destroy our financial independence. And the pandemic was a part of that. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses went bankrupt during lockdowns. We saw how then they brought in this whole climate change lockdown concept as well, which is probably going to be used at some stage. They created the energy crisis with this whole war in Ukraine. It was an engineered energy crisis. It didn't have to be that way. In fact, the sanctions have not affected Russia in the least, but they are affecting Western countries in Europe dramatically when it comes to industry. So all of these things that seemingly do not seem related really all form part of the same plan. We can talk about the farmers' protest as well and what they're doing to farming around the world. Why are they destroying those livelihoods? It all forms part of the same plan of creating this one totalitarian technocracy.
Yes, I had some guests and are trying to reveal to our Croatian audience these details, how they are planning to do it. And I had also interview with the guy who wrote the book about Ukraine war. And he explained that we're buying all gas and oil from Russia through other companies, exactly through other countries, still just for more expensive price than we do it usually. That means nothing has changed for Russia, but everything has changed for us in Europe because we are buying much higher prices. We also spoke about agriculture, and he explained me how this war for food is going on. But let's talk about this. This part of agriculture is now, in the present moment, they are protesting in Europe against this policy. They are protesting hard. Nobody in mainstream media wants to talk about it, but we need to mention it because it's a very important part of this, what you explained.
Yeah, it is absolutely a very important part, because if you control the food supply, you control the people. And that's what it's all about. It's a shift of trying to take away the independence of local farmers, small farmers, medium-sized farmers throughout the world, and put the food supply in the hands of big corporations, right? Then you control us because you're controlling our food supply. So we can really actually go back to perhaps 1991, when Agenda 21 was signed by 179 nations in Rio de Janeiro. That was the beginning of this whole sustainability concept, right? In 1992, the Club of Rome, who actually were the ones that came up with the whole climate crisis, because they needed to find a common enemy. They needed to unite humanity, not because they want us united, but because they want to create this one world government situation. They came up with this climate crisis. And of course, who do they blame for the climate crisis? They blame us, what we do. This human created climate crisis, which is not real and it's not based on science or fact at all, but it's the perfect excuse to reconvert industry, to reconvert agriculture as we are seeing. And this is what we're seeing right now all around the world. In Holland, we've seen it, in Germany, in France, in Spain. All the agricultural small owners are coming up and protesting because they're making their life impossible. And this is just because they want to shift that control of food into the hands of the very few, very large corporations.
Yeah, my guest explained it, how they done it. First, they done it to make them dependent of producers of seed and fertilizers. After that, they became dependent on financial institutions because they couldn't have a return on investment, and they needed to get loans for that. And after that, government pushed them back with the regularities, and now they are in the middle of these three strings who wants to crush them down and take their land away. And in this moment, they are capable to take their land away and give it to corporation, as you said.
It's a land grab. It's a major land grab. And a lot of people don't realize, but Ukraine is a good example of what you've just spoken about. We know, or people don't, the reasons why Russia came in. We knew the conflict that was going on in Donbass for the last 8 years since the coup in 2014. But maybe perhaps people are not so aware of certain changes that happened in Ukraine from the year 2021. They changed the law with regards to land ownership. So historically, land in Ukraine had been in the hands of the state, and local farmers, people had the ability to lease the land, and that's how it had been functioning throughout many decades during the Soviet rule. In 2021, they try to change that because the IMF made it a condition of certain loans that they had promised to Ukraine. They wanted to change these laws because they wanted transnational agribusiness corporations to start infiltrating in what is known as the breadbasket of Europe, right, which is Ukraine. And so a lot of what we see now and the fact that people are now protesting, it's not something that's just come up now. It's something that they've been preparing for many years. Like you say, let's give them financial help, but let's make them dependent on certain GMO type of seeds. Let's make them farm this way, and then let's bring in legislation that makes it actually impossible. Ukraine was a similar thing where people had been carrying on their agricultural businesses for decades, and suddenly they changed the law. They were able to buy the land, knowing full well that most farmers in Ukraine did not have the financial means to buy their land, which means they lost the land. And so they could be bought up by larger corporations. And it starts now, actually, January 2024, where first it started that corporations could buy up to 100 hectares. From January 2024. They can buy 10,000 hectares. So this is, again, a land grab. We are seeing methodically around the world how agricultural land is being dispossessed from farmers, from we the people, from generations of families that have been farming, to be able to put it in the hand of big corporations that will then control the food supply.
Yes, and I suggest to everybody to take a look of my interview with Thierry Laurent-Pellet. He explained everything, and he even showed who is the owner now of major part of agricultural land in Ukraine. The other tool what they are using is this so-called enemy, as you said, climate changes, and the biggest enemy for climate, it's us. Are we carbon that they want to remove?
Absolutely. We are the carbon they want to remove. There is a clear depopulation agenda behind all of this. And we can go into how they've gone about it in many different ways. The promotion of abortion. We have seen how these experimental vaccines have been anything but safe and effective. There's a whole array of ways in which the depopulation agenda has been at play. Definitely around the world. But yes, we are the carbon they want to destroy. And again, the whole carbon argument is really a joke. It really is a joke. And I like to remind people, we need to separate two things. What I'm trying to say when I say climate crisis is a hoax, people say, climate crisis is a hoax. You're a climate crisis denier. Let's separate two things. One thing is that we should really be taking better care of our environment. We should really find better ways of farming. We should find better ways of not creating the amount of pollution that we have created historically. That's one thing. Nobody is against finding better ways of doing things. But to blame human activity and carbon emissions on the whole climate change is ridiculous. And it's very easily destroyed, the whole argument, if you understand that CO2 in the atmosphere equates to only 0.04%. Only 0.04% of the atmosphere is CO2. And we only contribute, as humans, we only contribute 3% to that 0.04%. And they want you to think that you eating meat or you driving a car or you doing this or that is having an effect on the planet's weather. This is ridiculous. This is just an excuse to bring the taxation, to bring the reconversion of industry, to bring the destruction of farming as we know it, and to bring forth this fourth industrial revolution, in the words of Klaus Schwab, which will inevitably lead to this dystopian reality of a one world government.
And also I read one book. Just recently I had an interview with Dr. Judith Curry, and her book is Climate Uncertainties. and crisis, she explained exactly what you said. There is no climate crisis at all. We have policies that can be fight against, as you said, pollution of environment, but there is no climate crisis. And also, I read a book from Stephen Koenig. He is also expert in climate. He was leading department in Obama's administration, who is running climate changes. He explained everything. Because of this extending of CO2, we have now much greener Earth than before. And not only that, we have a big advantage with this warming climate, because there is some part of the world who are now have much better climate and they have much better agriculture. And before, much more people die from the cold than from the warming. But I have everything in this interview with Judy Curry. Tell me, there are also these people who are planning all of this. They usually, everybody thinks they have meetings. And just 1 month ago, there was a meeting in Davos. And they were talking about this. I remember one important thing, and that concerns you and me. One important thing what Ursula von der Leyen said is that now the most important fight, it's not against climate, it's not war in Ukraine. It's fight against misinformation and disinformation. For me, that means censorship. What do you think about this statement?
Yeah. Absolutely, it means censorship. Now, the one good thing about what came out of Davos, and you're right, it was one of the main focuses, it was this whole fight against disinformation and what they call disinformation and misinformation, which really practically most of the time just means anybody that dares to go against their narrative. So it's not about misinformation and disinformation. It's about disseminating truth. They don't want the truth to come out, because the more people that become aware of that truth, the less people that will comply with their plans. And we need to always bear in mind that their plans cannot come to fruition unless we cooperate with them, unless we comply, unless we help them get us there. And this is why they are so in panic when it comes to this sort of information going out. So for me, it was actually one of the biggest signs that we are winning this fight of putting out real information, truth, and just at least making people question, making people wonder, making people do some research of their own to try and understand what really is going on. So I was quite encouraged by the results of Davos this year, when they were clearly freaking out that the word is getting out there, that more and more people are aware of their nefarious agenda. This is a good thing.
And also, she didn't mention that who is really arbiter of truth. Because when you said that something is misinformation, then you have to prove it. Where is this court who will decide what is misinformation?
Well, exactly. There isn't one. It's their word. It's just they are so used, because historically, and you have to see that we all know that the world media is controlled by 5 or 6 big corporations. They have been so accustomed to really controlling the narrative completely, because unless they control the narrative, they cannot control our perception of what is going on. And it's only when they control our perception that they control our behavior, and therefore our actions. And therefore they can get us to do whatever it is that they want us to do. Now, the internet is a double-edged sword. And I believe the internet and the World Wide Web was released because it has been a great source of their own control. Now, it has become, on the other side, the greatest tool of disseminating an alternative truth, or an alternative idea, or an alternative way of thinking. And this has come back to bite them. And this is why now their biggest push is censorship. This has now become their woe. And, they realized during the pandemic that as much as they controlled a lot of it, and they were carrying out extreme types of censorship, and we've all been on the receiving end of that, they still did not manage to control the story completely. And we have seen how more and more people became more informed about the dangers of the vaccines, about how ridiculous it was to be wearing masks all the time, about how dangerous to people's psyches and to children's educations lockdowns were, as to how the lockdowns were very much just part of destroying the world's economy. Why were they doing this? So it has become very apparent that the truth movement, or in Klaus Schwab's own words, the anti-system movement, in other words, us, we are becoming stronger and stronger, and they are panicking. That's what I feel. They are panicking.
Yes, the lady who is running New York Times, she said that we cannot anymore control narrative. People don't want to read just our information. We need to explain them what we mean by this information, explain them how we came to this, and prove them. That means they are aware already that they are losing publicity. And one example is just on Twitter, there was an interview of Vladimir Putin with Tucker Carlson. And just until today, when we are shooting this video, there was a 200 million views. And this is something that our mainstream media, all United States mainstream media, cannot imagine to have this kind of publicity.
And this is, again, this unstoppable movement of people searching for truth, wanting truth, and demanding truth. And this is why alternative media has grown incredibly in the last 4 years, because people became aware of the lies and the manipulation that mainstream media was carrying out. We've seen the false flag events. We've seen how reporting is completely biased. People are fed up, and people are searching for alternative media outlets. And luckily and fortunately, and for right and wrong reasons sometimes, but everybody has now a video recording machine in their hands. You know, every phone is a recording device, a video device. And so very often now we get to see people on the ground telling us what the reality is, right? So it's not just this anchor guy in CNN telling us what is happening in Hawaii, or what is happening in Ukraine, or what is happening in Gaza. It's real people on the ground sending us real images of whether it's suffering or whether it's the reality of so-called wildfires that don't look like wildfires at all. But that's how people are beginning to sense, wow, there is now a source of greater truth in alternative media. And I think that Tucker's interview with Putin is a fantastic example of how people are searching truth in alternative channels.
They call this citizen journalist, but that who we are now. I am a citizen journalist because that was not my background, and I just started 1 year ago because I recognized that the main fight will be with this information. Okay, let's go back to their control again, because it's important now. What are the next steps? Just in the European Union, they are now voted for this digital wallet, we can call it, and all digital information about everybody will be in one first smartphone, and then later it could be below the skin. As you said, it's already below the skin, it's already in the brain, we know that. But they are planning to implement central bank digital currency. In Europe, it will be euro. In United Kingdom, it will be pound. Can you tell us what is your experience with this?
Well, like I said earlier, they need to establish this digital matrix in which everything will be interconnected. And so CBDCs, or digital currencies, are a very big part of that. I think they felt they were losing control in some manner of speech when cryptocurrency came into and Bitcoin came into being. And so they've been planning to have their own CBDCs launched, and there are a lot of governments around the world already having pilot programs and testing the whole thing. This is something that we must, as humanity, as we the people, really, really resist. We must not accept this, because this will be part of that total and complete control of everything that we do. And this is another reason why they're trying to destabilize the financial condition of countries. They're trying to destroy our livelihoods, because ultimately what they want is for us to be dependent on the state. dependent on a universal basic income that will be paid to us through our digital wallets in CBDCs. Now, the minute that they control your money supply, they control you. So they want to control your food, they want to control your money supply. And through that money supply, that CBDC, that digital wallet, they can very much control where you go, what you do, what you spend it on, because CBDCs can be programmable. So they can say you can only spend it on certain things, or you can only spend it until such an expiry date. And if you haven't, then, well, I'm sorry, it's gone. So really, it sounds horrific, like some sort of very awful dystopian 1984, but it is what they're trying to do, and there's no denying that, and they're not quiet about that, and they've been telling us. And so we really need to wake up fast to this reality, step out of the fear paradigm, and start putting up the resistance to all of these steps that will lead to a future in which humanity will be completely enslaved. To quote the WEF when they came up with that marketing campaign of "You will own nothing, and you will be happy." I'm not sure how we will be happy, and if we don't own anything, who is going to own it all? That's a good question, right? I think we know who.
Them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, we already had in the past this kind of government. It was called communism. And I remember in Yugoslavia, where we were before, everything was owned by state, and we were just so-called renting this ownership.
Yeah, I mean, if you analyze the type of future that they want, this one totalitarian type of global government, it's really Marxism on steroids. It's Marxism with the aid of AI and technology. Imagine. I mean, that's like the worst situation ever. If Marxism and communism is something not to ever be repeated, what they're trying to do is establish just that, but this time with the help of digital technology, AI, and all sorts of things. So definitely not something that we want for our children. And this is, I think, why you have become a journalist, why I am doing what I'm doing. This is not what I had planned to be doing, but it's a necessity. And if I can make a difference, well, here I am. And I think this is what we all need to start doing, even if we don't come in front of cameras. I think the only way that this world is going to change and move into a better direction than what we are on is by people becoming aware of the agendas, people becoming educated, and educating others. And luckily, this is now getting to a point where we're gaining a lot of momentum, and this is why they're freaking out and calling this war or misinformation and disinformation as the biggest threat of humanity. It's not the biggest threat for humanity. It's the biggest threat for them. It's the biggest threat for their plans.
Let's try to imagine if Stalin, for example, had this artificial intelligence, digital money, and digital wallet. What would he do? And we can find the answer what they want to do, because Klaus Schwab doesn't hiding that his role model of country is China. And he's telling this all the time. And when you look at his videos, you can see behind a statue of Lenin. That means he showing what is his ideal society. I had interview with David Rogers Webb about financial situation, and he explained me that they prepared everything already to take over our assets with the new financial crisis, what are for sure coming. They are prepared legally, and they prepare it already for 40 years. And that means we are already next generation who are continue to preparing. In a future crisis that he expects that will come very soon, they will be ready to take over our assets, and we are not aware of it because they are hiding behind with the laws what nobody is talking about. Do you know something about this?
Yes, I am aware of David Rogers' book. He titled it The Great Taking, which is a very good title, I thought, because it plays on the Great Reset, the Great Taking. If he's right, and I do believe he's right, because to be honest with you, his book is full of facts. It's a very factual book. It has links to all of the things that he is warning us about. And I think this is also one of the things that they will use in this aim to destroy the financial system as we know it. The Great Reset. When you reset something, you have to destroy what is there before. You have to pull the plug out. And David Rogers describes an incredibly nefarious plan that they have been putting in place for the last 5 decades, I believe, to be able to really strip us from our assets, from our securities. And so what they did slowly but surely was to change the concept of private property. They came up with a legal construct called securities entitlement, in which private property was somehow split into two. You can either have a beneficial ownership or legal ownership. Now, beneficial ownership sounds very nice because you think, well, I benefit from the ownership of whatever asset I have. But in the case of bankruptcy, in the case of dispossession, if you're not the legal owner, you are not really the owner of your asset, and they can take it away from you. So this is so very troubling. It has a lot to do with the derivatives complex, which is massive at the moment, and I believe they've allowed it to get so massive. It's in the trillions, with nothing really a foundation to keep it up, so that they can at any point pull the trigger. It could be a cyber attack or cyber pandemic, like Klaus Schwab has been announcing. It could be anything, whatever trigger they choose to use, and the whole financial system could really collapse like a house of cards. It's a very concerning plan that David describes there. That I always tell people, as long as you don't have too much debt, you might be okay. But I think debt is what they are holding on to be able to really collapse the financial system. I encourage everybody to read The Great Taking. They can go to the website, thegreattaking.com. It's a free ebook, and it is fascinating reading, very concerning.
Yes, they can download it below this interview with David Webb, and I also suggest everybody to take a look and to read it. It's very simple to understand, and you can check all information. And as you mentioned here, there is a big derivatives market, and it's $3 trillion of money, and they build it up to 57 trillion of derivatives on this, and it's really huge. And if this collapses, there is no way that we can save our ownership. We pass through all these things, what they are doing parallel, and now they are pressing hard us to accept. One of the things is also this new WHO contract, exactly treaty, they want to implement as a world government for the future situation of emergency. And how we can fight against each thing. So that means we have to fight on these all battles. But how to do it? Can you suggest us something?
Yeah, it's complicated because, as we have been discussing, we are being attacked, as it were, on many different fronts, and it can be quite overwhelming and quite scary when you're confronted with all of it at the same time. I think one of the most important things for people to bear in mind is that they are very few, whoever they may be, they are very few, and we are very many. And so really the power lies in our hands. And the only power that they have is as much as we give them. It's as much as we follow their directives. It's as much as we comply with their plans. It's as much as we do not resist. And so the number one thing that we must do, as I mentioned earlier, is to become educated as to what are these things that are going on in the world, so that I can not assist in the creation of those plans, but otherwise resist them and say no to them. And the more of us that say no, and the more of us that become aware, the less possibility there is for them to come to fruition. This is really one of the most important things that we can do. And of course, we can become more active. Of course, we can educate neighbors, educate our own children of how they're being indoctrinated at school, because that's, of course, how they're preparing future generations for that future, is by indoctrinating them already from kindergarten. So there are things that we can do, even though it seems a little overwhelming. And I believe that we are gaining, like I said, a lot of momentum in that a lot of people are becoming aware of a lot of things, and they're not prepared to simply go with the flow. I think the COVID pandemic was a bit of a test to see how compliant we would be. I think a lot of people fell for the manipulation, for the deception, for the psychological psyop of constant fear mongering that we were subjected to. But I think in these subsequent years, people have actually had the time to look back with a little perspective and almost seen themselves be the victims of that manipulation. And there's a lot of people that are saying, not again, not anymore. I am not going to fall for it. And this is really vital for us to fight these nefarious plans.
Yeah, we had some example, for example, in London, when they implemented ULEZ, ultra low emission zone, and they control it with cameras, of course, but there was one group who was cutting all these cameras all around, that they couldn't fix them so fast. Same thing they are preparing in Croatian capital, Zagreb. They want to implement 15-minute cities. They tell us it's for our good, we can walk all around without car, we don't need a car. But for sure they are implementing, of course, for purpose of saving a planet. That means there is some example how people are fighting. Maybe even using cash, because we see increasing using of cash in all European countries, especially in the United Kingdom. I think it's 7% rising. There is also in Germany, in Austria, using of cash is rising now. Maybe this is a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are very good examples of how we can resist some of the things that they're doing. But I think there's also another very powerful tool in our hands that we must really make better use, and that is how we use our money. That is how we can boycott certain companies, certain corporations that are aiding in this agenda or that are part of the agenda. It's time that we use our money as if they were voting mechanisms. I am not going to support this company because it stands for Agenda 2030. I'm not going to spend money of that other corporation because it's actually part of the same plan or the same agenda. We have an enormous amount of power in how we use our dollars or our euros. And we must put that in action in the same way that we can then perhaps assist local farmers in spending money with them and actually paying them with cash, helping more in our communities, those smaller businesses that are part of the fabric of our own areas, our own local villages, our own smaller cities, whatever the case may be. That is a very important way in which we can counteract some of this, and that we really must start to put into practice. Let's use our money to make sure that we can also steer things in the direction that we want, either by boycotting those that are against us and by helping those that are with us, in this resistance movement of ours.
How we can recognize who is supporting this Agenda 2030?
It's actually quite obvious when you just do a little bit of research. And unfortunately, the biggest corporations and big pharma and big tech are all part of it. They are part of this technocracy that they want to build. They are part of the Davos and the WEF. They are instruments of creating this dystopian one world government that we've been talking about. So it is quite obvious who they are. They have actually, in some cases, we saw, for example, what happened to Bud Light when they brought that ridiculous advertising with that transgender woman or man. I get very confused nowadays because you don't even know who they are or what they are. But we saw how the power of boycotting works. We have seen some very large companies and corporations lose enormous amounts of money, an enormous amount of share price in the stock exchange because we have said, I will not spend money on any product that is by a company that stands for values that I don't subscribe to, whether it's supporting certain wars, whether it's supporting the transgender agenda, whether it's supporting Agenda 2030. We need to really be very conscious of how we're spending our money so that our money counts in our fight.
And at last but not the least, we have elections in front of us, European elections In Croatia, there is also parliamentary election. In the United Kingdom, there is election very soon. What is your forecast how things will develop in this political era?
Oof, that's a difficult one to answer. Crystal ball, and as you say, 2024, I believe, is a record year in the number of elections throughout the world in major countries, in many countries. I don't remember the figure, but it was a huge number of countries holding elections this year. So
60.
it's Oh, but there you go. 60. It's an enormous amount. And it goes to show how 2024 is going to be a very transformative year, a very rocky year. I hope to see change, but I think it's going to be a little rough. Obviously, everybody's looking at the elections in the US coming up in November. Some people say we're not even going to get there. I don't know, but it'll be a very interesting thing to see how that develops. But I hope to somehow see that the resistance that we're talking about, that the greater awareness that now people have as to what is going on, will slowly but surely be reflected in the electoral colleges around the world. I really do hope so.
Do you have any final message of hope for Croatian people?
What a beautiful country, by the way. Hi to Croatia and your beautiful country. I think I have a message of hope for Croatians and for everybody around the world. I think humanity now stands the biggest chance to make the greatest transformation that we have ever made in the history of humanity. I really do believe that. We need to understand that we have been under the oppression of the ruling class since humanity is humanity in this planet, but that we have never had the technology that can enslave us, can also free us, because we have never been as connected as we are. The resistance globally has never been as connected as we are now. And this is critical. It's absolutely vital, because it is only in unity, we the people being united. And it is only in putting up a shared front, a united front, that we can actually make a change in the world, and we can actually foil their plans of total control and total world domination. So I think there's a huge amount of hope in this wonderful, great awakening that is happening as we speak. And so they may be planning the Great Reset, but we are answering with the Great Awakening. And guess what? Unless we go with their plans, they cannot implement them. If we stop cooperating, they cannot do what they're planning on doing. We are the ones that are meant to build our own walls, our own imprisonment. We're not going to do that anymore, because we've become conscious and we've become aware of those plans. So I think there is wonderful, wonderful hope for all of us. But we must continue. We must be vocal. We must resist. We must put our money where it counts and not where it doesn't. And we must be united, and we must really stop believing in this sense that humanity is weak, that we are powerless, that we need for the control. We are wonderful, God-given, God-created creatures, and we can turn this around. I do believe that and this is our chance to do that.
Thank you, Laura. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you very much. A pleasure too.
Evo, dragi narode, imali ste priliku danas čuti opet jedan razgovor koji vas vrlo vjerojatno podsjeća na sve ono što sam sa drugim mojim gostima razgovarao. Pa si postavite pitanje, nije li čudno da susrećete ljude iz cijelog svijeta koji dolaze iz sasvim različitih područja. Dakle, imamo poduzetnike, imamo doktore, imamo znanstvenike, imamo ekonomiste, imamo stručnjake za klimu, imamo stručnjake za novac. I svi kada objašnjavaju svoju užu specijalnost i kada se osvrću na primjer na pandemiju ili na klimatske promjene, na nešto, uvijek kažu jedno te isto. Dakle, ovo što smo danas mi razgovarali. Govore kako su stvari povezane, kako imaju zajednički cilj, kako su samo alati za provođenje cilja, a da iza toga stoji dobro promišljena i organizirana akcija. Stoga nije loše pomisliti ili provjeriti da li možda ovi ludi teoretičari zavjere kao što sam ja, u stvari samo su dobro informirani, samo puno čitaju, provjeravaju i nisu dovoljno naivni kako bi povjerovali vlastitim vladama i službenim politikama kada nas uvjeravaju da rade za naše dobro. Osvjedočili smo se previše puta kako im naše dobro nije na prvom mjestu. Stoga, nadam se da ste zadovoljni sa temom koju vam otvaram. Pozivam vas da provjeravate sve ovo što govorim. Imate izvore i na mom kanalu, imate izvore na društvenim mrežama. Pratite ljude koje ja pozivam kao goste i na kraju sami odlučite što je istina i sami odlučite kako ćete se postaviti prema tome. Sve je, kao što ste čuli, u vašim rukama, a sad je samo vrijeme da to i pokažemo. Hvala vam lijepo na pažnji i vidimo se uskoro u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svoje voljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijeri, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi?